It's never been more important than today to align with a strategic lending team. The pre-qualification stage of the home buying process is where forming a strategy for the buyer agent's commission begins. This is where you need to know at least what your options are if the seller is not going to offer cooperative compensation. How does this look from a lending perspective? We'll talk about it next. So just as lenders have helped buyer's agents determine what should be negotiated into the contract offer for closing costs, the commission conversation is the same. Now agents need to know whether the borrower is in a position to pay the buyer agent's commission, and if not, what are the options? So option one is the commission is built into the sales price. Option number two is the seller is either not paying any buyer agent commission or maybe not the full amount that the buyer broker agreement calls for. In this case, the strategy might be to increase the purchase price and then ask that the buyer agent's commission be paid in the full amount that matches the buyer compensation agreement. Here's what you need to know about option number two. In this scenario, if the buyer is using financing and the house does not appraise for at least the sales price, you could be back to having a conversation about new strategies to approach this conversation. So just know that yes, number two is an option, and yes, you can build it into the purchase price. Let's say that the purchase price is $500,000 and in option two, maybe the seller is not contributing anything towards a buyer agent's commission. Increasing that price to $515,000, covering, let's just say, a 3% commission rate, but it can be whatever the buyer broker agreement is. In that case, we're increasing the purchase price. The net proceeds to the seller is the same, and essentially you end up kind of financing that cost, if you will. Again, in that scenario, it is important that the house appraises above the sales price, so make sure that you're looking at comps and that the comps are supporting the $515,000 purchase price. Option number three, this is where we'll get creative and assess what the buyer has with regard to assets and funds for down payment. So in this scenario, let's say the buyer has 10% to put down. Then what we're doing here is possibly a reduction in the down payment to allow for the buyer agent's commission to be paid with those funds. Option number four is the buyer chooses to just pay the buyer agent's commission at close of escrow. It is important to know that if the buyer just chooses to write a check and pay the buyer's agent commission, those funds have to be sourced according with lending guidelines, which means they have to be documented. When that purchase contract comes in, remember, we have to have already had the conversation about commission at the pre-approval stage. We also have likely already updated our finance analysis pre-offer for that buyer based on the particular property they've identified as to what has been revealed with regard in whatever the unique buyer agent's commission the seller is paying for that property. If anything is changing or not changing when that purchase contract comes in, it is very important that a lender verify and know what the numbers are, meaning whatever the seller is or is not contributing and how that relates to the buyer broker agreement. If there is a differential, meaning maybe the seller is paying 2% and the buyer broker is for 3%, then we have to solve for 1%. That is where the strategies in this analysis will work. But we have to know the numbers. So we're going to be asking for the details because we know that the funds have to be sourced and want to be sure that we have the documentation required to get across the finish line. The fear is if lenders have not adapted their processes to allow for this additional verification step, then those funds are not accounted for. This could possibly be costly, a mishap, and potentially delay the process, requiring a change in compensation, or maybe the loan does not even get approved at all. So we want to avoid all that drama by starting at the pre-approval stage, knowing what the buyer funds are and what we're trying to solve for with regard to additional funds that may be needed, down payment, etc. So this is solvable. We are going to get through it. Take a breath, and if you need a strategic lending partner to walk through these things, feel free to reach out. So hopefully that helps. Use my team as a resource to get the answers you need. If you know someone looking to buy, build, renovate, refinance, or invest in real estate, consolidate debt, or roll over an old 401k, let me know. Head over to meetupwithryan.com and schedule a time to talk, or go ahead and get an application rolling at fundedbyryan.com. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel at ryancoxtv.com. Hit me up if you have any questions.